This aquatic eldritch horror comic book is a rare gem of horror. Today on Marvelous Videos, we'll be taking a look at The Wake Explored. Fans of horror, adventure, sci-fi, and good graphics are ready for this underwater adventure. You guys are in for a treat, and would definitely enjoy reading Scott Snyder's words and viewing Sean Murphy's art in The Wake. The DC imprint Vertigo has quite understandably gone ahead and put their faith in Scott Snyder. After his work on the Batman series, he has wowed both old and new fans alike, earning him awards and respect in the industry. He's written horror, noir, and superhero books, and he's combined all three genres on occasion. He is best known for his 2006 short story collection, Voodoo Heart, and his work on American Vampire, Detective Comics, Batman, Witches, Swamp Thing, and the Justice League comic books. The Wake is a 10-issue miniseries belonging to the sci-fi horror genre. While many sci-fi comics go down the space exploration and finding new adventures and stars route, Snyder creates his universe using the ocean instead. He curates a detailed 3-time period timeline for this series, where he has created a past for his creatures and how they developed, the middle period, which seems like the present, where he shows his mer creatures go ahead and take over the world as we know it, and also a dystopian future, which is quite horrific considering it could very much become a reality. So let's explore The Wake together, shall we? Before we get into today's explanation, however, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to Marvelous Videos. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks! Now then, let's begin. Long Way Down. The first issue of The Wake is a sci-fi deep-sea adventure that seems to be in line with the recent Animal Planet faux documentaries on mermaids. Example, Mermaids: The Body Found and Mermaids: The New Evidence, which hundreds of people, it seems, believe to be factual documentaries, and incorporates the kind of eerie horror that comes from intelligent fiction about real-life mysteries of the deep. Snyder took inspiration for his characters from the news of the discovery of an ancient whale in the sea. Snyder's story jumps back and forth in time, from 5.1 million years ago, and shows us a 2001 Space Odyssey style version of early man, dark, fascinating, and tied directly to the larger narrative, to the 200 years ago heroine attempting to solve a mystery deep within the underwater station. He also brings us to the present day, a world engulfed by water. When we return to the book's present tense at the end of the issue, it feels a little more like the future. I admit, I had almost lost where we had started in the first issue. The comic starts off with a futuristic, dystopian scene that seems to be present day. Snyder names this section The Quest. In this new world, the streets are drowning in water. It looks like no man's land and no place to step foot. This is where we meet our first character, who will remain a mystery for a while. She flies using a glider and is best friends with a dolphin that is either half metal or just has perfect dressing sense. Each issue of Snyder's The Wake starts with a bit snippet like this. He does a great job of introducing characters and keeping you hanging every time he does this. Since the initial sequence, it never continued. It's like a little puzzle piece for the future, tantalizing you and wanting to read more. The first part of the entire comic focuses on the past, more specifically 200 years before the dystopian scene showed to us. It follows the life of Dr. Lee Archer, a cetological vocalization specialist. She is a character that is clearly made for the ocean. She is shown to be talking to a giant whale while being on a call with her son. She seems to be having the most peaceful life at sea until a shadowy character, Agent Aster Cruz from Homeland Security, decides to ruin it for her. Dr. Archer seems to simply hate every minute she has to spend talking to Agent Cruz because she assumes that he's here to talk about the government project that she is vocaling so strongly against. However, he is there to convince her to join a team of other specialists to investigate a strange new sound heard from the deepest oceans. He manages to convince her to help him out with this project by using her love of the sea and her love of her son as bait. He gave her a ray of hope. The Wake's cast is fascinating, where each character appears to have lived a whole life, providing a rich history and distinctive viewpoint to the group dynamic. The team consists of Agent Cruz himself, the guy behind the curtain who's been pulling everyone's strings, Dr. Marin, a folklore and mythology professor, Meeks, a brash biologist, Bob Wainwright, and his ex-employee, Lee Archer, making up the entire squad. Lee, like Bob, is a marine biologist, and the two appear to have a long history together. Lee is a likable and dynamic female character, which makes it all the more interesting to read The Wake. They meet aboard a submarine, assuming that their specialized knowledge is required to solve a mysterious puzzle. Quickly enough, however, they find out that they have all been told very different things. Raindrops, Myths, and Evolution. Snyder, rather brilliantly, closed the last chapter with a full image of the creature. In this chapter, he ties in Archer's devotion to her son in this issue, while giving us a glimpse of the mer creature's powers. The mer creature looks half human and half fish. It can manipulate minds and thoughts. It shows Archer a vision of her son inside the water with her in the submarine until she is brought back to reality by her colleagues. After that, all of the specialists realize how their experience in their respective fields is required to find out more about this creature. The creature's sound affects other sea creatures as well. For instance, the jellyfish scattered immediately when they heard the creature's call. They decide to capture the strange mer creature to study it further. The creature is actually an excellent manipulator. It appeared to be dead to get the crew members to open the release on the pressure of the tank and check on it when it lunged at the worker, severely injuring him. Dr. Marin, the folklore professor, calls it a raindrop. A raindrop is a real-life ripple system of folklore. This creature is said to be at the center point of many legends, folklore, and mythological stories across cultures. The way habit of the Asiatic walking on its hind legs inspired the myths of the Yetis. The specialists bounce off each other, giving their opinions and theories when we see a tiff between Bob and Archer. Archer is an idealistic biologist who genuinely cares about animals, while Bob seems to only care about the money and fame. He supported an unethical defense project that hurt animals. Honestly, this part of the comic is not far from reality. Our shores and aquatic life have been contaminated and harmed daily by big corporations and the military, which Snyder does an excellent job at pointing out subtly. Archer gives us a theory of an aquatic ape. The aquatic ape theory says that about 5 million years ago, due to climate change and predation, early ancestors started spending more time in the water instead of the land, so much so that they became amphibious. She goes on to talk about how scientists believe that most of our evolution as humans began in the water and helped us turn into the physiological human beings that we are today. This begs the question, what if some of them stayed in the water as opposed to going onto land? After saying her piece, the group breaks off and does their own research on the creature. In the middle of the night, the injured worker, Matthew, seems to be having a dream about his wife. She sits on a rock and asks him to turn on the waterfall. In reality, it is the lever that controls the cage. The mer creature manipulates and visualizes his way out of the tank. He finds Archer and appears to her as her son, Parker, once again. Snyder ends this chapter by giving us a glimpse of the dystopian future that he has planned for us, leaving us with a sense of thrill and dread. Snyder manages to strike a balance between stylistic clues and actual revelation and plot progression, leaving the reader feeling confident in themselves, thinking that they know where the tale has gone, even if the next step is a jumble of disconnected dots and questions. The mystery discovery supposed history is intriguing, to say the least, but there's still a lot of room for speculation. What does it want to achieve? Are these hallucinations merely coincidental, or are we witnessing the emergence of a siren from the depths of our past? What does all this have to do with that strange girl from the future? The strange Mengler, people who look like a cross between a chimpanzee and a shark, is persistently homicidal, causing us all to wonder just how terrible this new, so yet confined threat has become. Murphy continues to create a legitimately scary portrayal of both creatures and humans, pitting Archer's colleagues against deep-sea monsters for the most horrific outward traits. Murphy's ability to capture tension compares favorably to horror classics, like the original Alien, making for an exciting and scary read. This, along with Snyder's deft symbolic work, creates a really satisfying read-through. A Sea of Monsters. We see that the mer creature broke out of its cage and reached Archer's room, visualized as her son Parker. There is a phantom vision of her son when a little birdie starts giving her warnings, telling her that this is not her son and that she needs to move now. She finally gets out of the trance, and Agent Cruz shoots at the creature. They theorize that the mer creature to have venom or neurotoxins in its pupils, which could create hallucinations. Unfortunately, it gets away into the deep blue sea, using an injured man who had, in his hallucination, opened a part of the rig. The rig begins to flood when another worker on the rig tries to find a safe place. In a selfless manner that only a heroine can have, our heroine decides to help Bob, the biologist that she hates. Unfortunately, our hallucination-causing mer creature gets to him before she can and bites his hand off, ultimately killing him. In their attempt to escape, they realize that the doors aren't closing and that the creature is too fast to outrun. As a solution, Meeks decides to sacrifice himself for the thrill of the catch and the group's greater good. The rest of the group decides to abandon the rig and get into the submarine, which is their best bet for survival. They decide to go around the rig to reach the submarine. Agent Cruz doesn't understand the urgency, even though his arm has been bitten half off, when Archer tells him about the 52 Hz whale. It is known as the loneliest whale because it is the only whale that communicates at 52 Hz, which is way above the range at which whales normally communicate. Some cetologists think that the whale is deaf, while some think that it's just deformed. However, Archer believes that the whale's call isn't a call at all. It is conversation filled with calls and responses. The creature makes a lot of sounds similar to the 52 whale's urgent section of the song. It is this section that comes right before a response. A massive response because the creature is talking to them. Instead, it is talking to other creatures like him. After building the panic, he ends the chapter with a large group of mer creatures swimming above a person. This chapter is the closest we will ever get to the profound claustrophobia of films like Alien and being trapped inside a massive rig at the bottom of the sea with an unnatural creature that we'll ever get in a comic book. As superb as ever, Murphy's art is partly responsible for the claustrophobia we can almost feel from the text. The rig's structure, with tiny, narrow halls and massive bulkhead doors that always appear to lock unknowing victims in the beast, captures the impression of industrial claustrophobia. Not only that, but he also shows the rig gradually filling up with water on each panel, which, we might say, is difficult to achieve with still panels. Survival of the fittest. While The Wake is not the type of novel that frequently leaves you with more questions than answers, it's somehow not as annoying as it could be as a storytelling strategy. In each issue, Snyder has been developing mythology over multiple periods, interlacing pieces from a larger story within the structure of his primary storyline. The prologue of the comic takes place 100,000 years ago, when two tribes engage in a horrific and deadly battle, one of which is armed with a strangely modern technology. This out-of-date prologue alluded to mythology of epic proportions. Coming back to the central part of the story, after going out to the sea searching for the submarine, they find out that the subs have all been destroyed, and they must go back to the rig amidst a flock of mer creatures. This is an environment of panic and a need to save themselves, but Archer still tries to rescue Agent Cruz. It is ill-fated that he gets captured by the mer creatures and meets his death. He shares a moment of camaraderie with Dr. Archer during his last moments, which make the scene even more emotional. The mer creatures, however, seem to have surrounded the rig and are blocking all their options. They decide to try out the pipeline as a last resort. They make it inside just in time and crush a mer creature in between the doors during the process. They decide to go down the pipeline and radio someone for help, even though nobody knows the existence of the rig or the people working there. Just then, they see a herd of mer creatures heading towards them. They run the other way and override the security code to close the doors, when one of the mer creatures turns out to be Meeks, wearing the face of the creature as a disguise. Their current hiding place is of a lesser stability level than the rig, which means that the creatures would be able to tear through it faster than they did with the rig. Turns out, the mer creatures took down the entire rig. Archer has a mother's guilty conscience, where she is trying her hardest to get out of a situation that has no exit, because she never got Parker the cables for his game that she was supposed to get. There is solidarity even amongst the group of survivors in their last moments. Marin, our folklore expert, tells the group the piece of folklore that first got him interested in the subject. The story gives Archer an idea to run the drill at high speed. The project that she's been opposing creates a sonic boom that would make whales' ears bleed. So, she suggests running the drill at high speed and create a similar effect as would make the mer creatures back off at the least. While it does seem to be working to scatter the mer creature away, they see the drill base shaking, only to be shocked with the existence of a giant alpha male of a mer creature emerging from the bottom of the drill. Envisioned into existence. Snyder starts this chapter by showing a memory of Archer's. It is a moment with her dad, when she tells him she wants to study cetology, and he says that she's just like her mother. He is about to call them his mermaids, when they are interrupted by the sound of what was either a mer creature or something else. Snyder hops back into the chaotic situation at the drill, where we see the alpha mer creature rising along with thousands of smaller mer creatures. Suddenly, we see Archer come to the realization that the mer creatures have been biding their time so far. They have been feeling out the rig, and now that they have destabilized it, they will attack the mainland. Snyder hits us with the folklore once again. This time, it is about the Hafguna, a creature, or beast if you will, across cultures that sink the world. We get a sense of dread, along with the folklore in this part. Meeks decides to be selfless yet again, and takes everyone to a hunting lodge, where he keeps a weaponized submarine in order to go deep-sea hunting. They know they will die soon enough, because the submarine is not made to surface. It can only go deeper into the sea. Since everyone is living their last moments, Archer decides to tell the others about her memory. We have only seen glimpses of it in the prologues of each chapter so far. This time, Snyder doesn't disappoint. We get to know that Archer says something that she likes to call the City of the Dead. She claims that that experience seems to have a prophecy telling her the entire population of the Earth will be at the bottom of the ocean. Meek switches the electric field on during their escape attempt to keep the mer creatures at bay, when the biggest mer creature swims right on top of them. He decides to deploy the explosives he keeps in his submarine, even though he knows that it would result in them sinking and dying. He urges Archer to use the communicator in the console to at least say goodbye to her son. She is put in contact with an anxious Parker, who is very concerned for his mother's safety. Thankfully, she manages to calm him down and tries to extend his life as much as possible. She tells him to go deeper into the mainland and stock up on resources. Snyder and Murphy have done a fantastic job showing the emotions of a mother in a panicked situation. Using that panic to their leverage, we see Archer's story end along with her life. Within a day, the creatures have sunk the coastal cities. Scott Snyder and Sean Murphy have discovered a way to delve into our most primitive anxieties, concluding their first arc with a gloriously horrifying finale, yet not without a splash of optimism. Back to the future. The world has changed 200 years after the events of Part 1, thanks to the fish monsters melting the polar ice caps. The lowest land masses have been submerged, and humanity is surviving in makeshift scavenger camps. We've seen snippets of this futuristic, post-apocalyptic world previously, but now the developers get to present it to us in its entirety. This universe is seen through the eyes of Leeward, our new protagonist. The creatures have multiplied and become more and more assertive since first appearing to the fateful band of scientists. The ice caps melted as a result of their manipulation of the ocean's currents. The Mers assaulted humanity as the water rose and poured inland, bringing civilization to the brink of anarchy. Leeward, along with her glider and her trusty dolphin Dash, is a fish monster headhunter, literally. She manipulates the manipulator mer creatures by pretending to drown. And then uses a sound frequency, but not her dolphin, and takes their heads. The world has turned into a futuristic floating market, where Lee goes and trades the fish heads for things like fresh water or radio devices that allow her to uncover the mysteries of the world before. On this particular day, she sells the fish head full of venom for a long-range transmitter that would allow her to listen to sounds more profound in the ocean. Snyder gives a little insight into the character by letting her actions tell the viewer about her character traits. Throughout this entire issue, the supporting cast is introduced, and they are all appropriately gritty. They are survivors. This world is cruel, and they've grown cold enough to get through each day. We are introduced to several new threats, and while the Mers is undoubtedly one of them, Snyder shows us that humanity may be just as dangerous to itself. The increase in ocean levels and the flooding of land has been blamed on the Mers, saying that they carried the ocean water to the ice and melted it instead of blaming humans and climate change. Pub, the merchant who gave Lee water the ear, is shown to be her father figure, who is concerned about her safety as the government is cracking down on exploratory activities to remain authoritarian and in control. Leeward beats their concerns by asking valid questions, like if there's nothing out there, then why is the government concerned if she's looking for something? She wants humanity to stop being erased by the ocean every passing second, and to achieve that, she is looking for clues in the water itself. Snyder and Murphy have given a subtle correlation between Archer and Leeward. Archer's perpetually dry eyes pointed out by her father can be seen in Leeward's character as well. This fills us with the hope that Parker, Archer's son, might have survived and lived. The scene changes to a place called Crane City, which was the larger freshwater reservoir. Government officials and the governess are introduced here. She talks to a man named Mr. Deeds and tells him how they have changed the natural bird to the crane instead of the eagle, as it is a territorial, fierce, and, well, can stand in water because that seems to be the criteria for a water nation, I guess. She seems to approve of him, but then her aide shoots the man. Turns out, Deeds was the one who had sold the long-range ear to Leeward. Next thing we know, Leeward's house is being surrounded by the Metalia for possession of a long-range ear. The biggest twist is that her radio starts up while she's fighting to escape them. It gives a transmission from Lee Archer, our first protagonist, who claims to know how to save the world. As expected from Murphy, as and when the tale requires, the palette varies quickly, moving from delicate washed-out panels to pages that feel saturated and dark. It's a stunning mix with a lot of pop and strong focus on some essential aspects, such as the water itself, which is breathtaking in its clear blue. Leeward is an unusual color, slightly orange and darker in tone than the other characters, implying her active hunting life on and in the sea. We think that most comics should have these kinds of well-considered colors. The Great Escape. We start this chapter with a memory of Leeward's childhood. She is seen in a hybrid plane with her father listening to radio waves. Her father gets arrested by the government, so he tells Lee to step on the gas and runs away. It washes over us with a bittersweet feeling, which is a great way to start any chapter. As we saw in the last chapter, Leeward got arrested. She was put into a boat collecting garbage to pad up the reef, along with Pub. However, she doesn't lose her fight, even in these dire circumstances. She plans on running away before her limbs blowed up and leading to her being stuck in that boat. She gets caught talking about it with General Marlowe, the man who arrested not only her, but her parents as well, putting a gun to her head. He tells her to go swimming, which is a not-so-subtle way of saying, "You are my food now." The governess has ordered Marlowe to kill the people brought onto the ship. Before he could execute those orders fully, however, a giant mer creature came out of the ocean and sank the ship. Leeward's dolphin Dash appears just in time to save her. She uses his jacket to create the frequency and keeps the mer people at bay. Apparently, it doesn't work on giant mers, because one emerges right behind her and swallows her along with her dolphin. Plot twist, there is a ship inside the mer creature's mouth, and it seems to be a pirate ship of sorts. The Search for Truth. The Wake continues its fantastic run with the 8th issue, which considerably raises the stakes both emotionally and plot-wise. There are many mysteries, but Snyder promises solutions as he explores deeper into the fascinating realm. This time, he doesn't give us an Easter egg before the main story. He dives right into it, introducing the people in this pirate ship. The captain of the ship, Captain Mary, introduces herself and then lets a mer creature loose at Lee. On the other hand, Captain Marlowe is busy shooting at the creatures when help arrives for him. Once rescued, he is taken to meet the governess, Vivian, who is also some sort of a creature, it seems. However, we don't really know what she is or why she seems to become a standard beauty in water, even though she is far from it on land. The panels then switch back to Lee, who finally gains consciousness. Understandably enough, she is enraged and asks why they let loose the mer at her, as it could have killed her. The mer is named Walleye, and he has no teeth but potent venom, which they use to put people under deep sleep to protect their secrets. The conversation then moves fast from there. Captain Mary shows her how the ship works while showing admiration for her. Looks like people in this new world bond over their dislike for General Marlowe. However, she doesn't want to join the crew and would rather put her own life in danger to find out where that signal had come from. The pirates claim that the Mers treat them differently. They show them things that they wouldn't lead others to. They dismiss the call that Lee heard, until she mentions Lee Archer's name. While Lee seems to be making progress with the crew, Marlowe struggles to communicate with the governess, who keeps singing a children's lullaby, Row 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 Your Boat, and telling them stories. This deflection convinces him that the signal was authentic, and not something Leeward made up. The crew makes Lee listen to yet another message by Archer, but it is different than the one she heard in her house. This signal came from the ship that Meeks had used as the last escape, along with the survivors of the Mer attack in the first part of the comic. The pirates have been using Meeks' locomotive, and they call it St. Meeks. However, Lee is convinced that the signal she heard wasn't a coincidence. Instead, she believes it was a new signal. We've set the stage for the hunt for the signal, with Governess Vivian and her entourage following closely after they had chipped Lee's shoulder without her awareness. Scott Snyder has demonstrated that there is always more beneath the surface than we are aware of. While the Mers make this a physical actuality for our protagonist, Snyder proves it to his readers with each new twist and revelation. The governess reaches the ship and asks for Lee. There is an air of hesitation around, but Captain Marcy comes through. They drop the rockets on the government ship, go back into the Mer creature's body, and wade away. Snyder ends the chapter with another wave of optimism and hope, as Lee joins the crew and they all decide to save the planet. No quest returned. Any hopes of things slowing down and allowing tension to develop for the finale are dashed just a few pages into the penultimate chapter of the series. The first issue of The Wake opens with Leeward, now the intriguing Captain Mary's first mate, keeping a captain's log similar to that of her enigmatic predecessor Lee Archer. After persuading Mary that a radio signal from the 21st century could be the key to saving the world from the vicious race of mer creatures, the ship and the crew set out to investigate the mysterious transmission. From this point on, Snyder and Murphy began to chip away at any hope that may have been built up during this arduous journey. Their Mer, which doubles as their submarine, reaches a snowy place which is said to be somewhere near Ethiopia. There is a calm before the storm that they seem to be experiencing. They're expecting to find something left behind by the scientists featured in the first part of the series that will aid the survivors in their fight against the Mers. Yet, it could just be different false hope, or worse, a trap. They employ well-placed explosives to trace the signal far underground, to blast a hole in some of the only remaining dry areas. When the dust settles, it appears like they discovered a tomb containing pictographs telling the story about the Mers. This brings us to another one of the prologues that we saw at the first part of the comic, where a man was locked in a cave while creating drawings on the walls. They don't find an immediate and tangible option to save the world, but there is a button named Salvation in the cave, which causes tension among the crew. One of the members tries to attack Lee when the governess, our power-hungry antagonist, arrives with a small army set on wreaking chaos and ruin just as Leeward and her team begin their investigation. Our beloved captain loses her life in the governess's attack, and he tells Lee to take care of the ship. Unfortunately, Lee can't keep the promise, because Vivian decided to bomb their ship till it bleeds in the water. Lee is highly disappointed by their discovery when the Murs drag her into the water. She sees the same vision as Archer had in Part 1. Snyder leaves us to revel in this curveball. The ocean is an adventure waiting to happen. Snyder rewards those who have been paying attention with this finale. The last issue, like the rest of the series, cannot be readily devoured and comprehended by people searching for a quick and straightforward amusement. We don't know what happened when Lee was under the sea, as Snyder sneakily starts the chapter with the governess capturing Lee immediately after she surfaces. Thankfully, we circle back to it, and Snyder doesn't leave us in suspense. The city of the dead that Archer had seen is a reality, and she is now part of it. It consists of all the people the Mer creatures carried down there. They seem to be alive, yet dead. But that could change. It all depends on Leeward. Leeward doesn't get discouraged by the beating and belittling. She continues to tell them her experience, and how she gave an artifact that she found in the cave to Archer. It would help bring the place back to life. It reminds us of Atlantis, except there's no place for sea gods. The creatures have been keeping the people alive by oxygenating their blood through the skin. The government will not listen to Leeward's explanation of what happened in the underwater cave once she returns to the surface. The governess indicates that the entire scenario was a hallucination, in between threats of torture. It demonstrates that humanity had purposely closed their eyes and lapsed into a dream that they had permanently inhabited Earth. Understanding the reality of their positions required them to open their eyes and regain vision. Leeward thinks that it is a ship that the creatures came on. Snyder comes up with another plot twist. It is not the Murs who invaded the land of the humans. Rather, it was the other way around. She learned from Dr. Archer, humans are an alien species who have forgotten their own beginnings. Because they are not seeking to completely exterminate mankind, the Mer creatures are not entirely ruthless towards them as an invasive species. Some humans have been restored to their ship, probably the most clever and caring. This keeps the gang together as they prepare to travel to the next planet on their list. The spaceship defies the sonic net and rises up from the water, while government officials rejoice over keeping the truth from the people. A ray of hope appears at that moment, and General Marlowe shoots the president in the head. While assassinating a figurehead is never a good way to put an end to a movement, it is an excellent way to get Leeward out of prison, and she runs into the sea with his support. The governess is a classic dystopian villain who desires solely personal fame at the expense of the remaining population's determination. In that regard, she had appeared a little too familiar up until this point in the series, so it was good to see her disclose some unexpected complexity before the story came to a close. For people and Murs to coexist, the last bastion of human government must be abandoned. Leeward and Mer stand at the ocean's surface after the airship is destroyed and the spaceship leaves the planet. Her acceptance of knowledge and coexistence marks the start of a new period, which begins with a kind gesture. She waves to the Mer, who descends quietly. Daybreak hangs over the beautifully lighted ocean scene with a patchwork sail in the shape of a Mer's face. The ship, named after General Marlowe's slain daughter, and a fresh-faced Leeward directing the ship, while Murs and Dash the Dolphin sprint over the waves in the wake. Leeward's final words are a battle cry for our world's inhabitants. Human and Mer alike, don't cry. Be brave. It's all an adventure. Why should you read The Wake? What begins as a lighthearted horror series finishes in the triumph of optimism over oppressive powers. The Murs, despite being the frightening hook that drew many readers into the series, have very little to do with the events of Leeward's climactic struggle. It's not horrible, but it's a significant departure from what most people expected the series to take after the first issue. Even as massive explosions occur, Snyder's writing never comes across as self-righteous or preachy, and he manages to sneak in countless minor character moments that give further layers of emotion to the ending. Even in its own genre, The Wake has been about twists and turns from the start. Scott Snyder and Sean Murphy are a fantastic partnership, and they've packed so much depth, no pun intended, into this horror narrative, and it's bound to be a success in trade format. The ending is exciting and unexpected, and it appears to follow the series' goal to the letter. The Wake is a dystopian sci-fi horror comic that makes you think and uncover the deeper subtexts embedded inside it. The fear of the unknown, as well as the scary reality of the rising oceans, not only make you think about all that is hidden under those beautiful blues, but it also raises a legitimate concern for environmental conservation. The fact that the ocean is a largely unexplored territory in the real world makes the story's premise close enough to reality to make it truly scary. It is a comic that makes us think about how our actions affect the real world and teaches us about coexistence. It leaves us with a beautiful message of hope, no matter how complicated. It tells us that the only way we can survive is by coexisting with the Murs, by not only respecting their space, but by acknowledging that they are our memories. They will keep us accountable and never forget, while treating this new world as a place of discovery and adventure waiting to happen. It reminds us to be kind and caring, regardless of species. It is a must-read with the ability to touch one's heart and makes us more mindful of how we treat nature and this planet we call home. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to send a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Rylan. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks for watching.